The British Labour government is in a complete freefall. Last week's local elections across the UK, they weren't just a bad night for Keir Starmer. They were a political earthquake that shook the entire British establishment to its very foundations. And what if I told you that since that earthquake hit, Starmer's own cabinet has started resigning one by one, then in waves, forcing Starmer to literally lock himself inside number 10 Downing Street.
Tuesday morning, Keir Starmer walked into Downing Street expecting a normal cabinet meeting. By Tuesday evening, 5 of his senior ministers had resigned. Not over policy disagreements, over complete loss of confidence in his leadership. Wednesday morning, he stood in Parliament, looking visibly shaken. His hands trembled, holding his notes. His voice cracked twice during Prime Minister's questions, and when asked if he would resign, he couldn't give a straight answer. This isn't political pressure. This is psychological collapse happening in real time. The Prime Minister of the United Kingdom is breaking down in public while his government disintegrates around him. And what I'm about to show you is why this is the biggest political crisis Britain has faced in decades. Because governments survive scandals, they survive policy failures. They don't survive the Prime Minister losing control of himself and his cabinet simultaneously.
It started Tuesday morning. The first to go was Miata Fambule, Minister of Devolution, Faith, and Communities. Then by midday, 4 ministers in a single day. And by Tuesday evening, over 80 Labour MPs, it's members of Parliament, nearly a quarter of Starmer's entire parliamentary party had publicly called for his resignation.
Chapter 1. The 48 hours that destroyed a government. Tuesday started normally. Cabinet ministers arrived at Downing Street for the weekly meeting. The agenda was routine. Economic updates. Legislative priorities. Nothing unusual. Then Home Secretary Yvette Cooper stood up. According to sources in the room, she didn't shout. She was calm. But her words were devastating. She told Starmer directly that his leadership was failing. That immigration policy was in chaos. That crime was rising. That the public had lost faith. And that he needed to consider his position. Starmer tried to shut down the conversation. This wasn't the forum for leadership challenges. They could discuss it privately. Cooper refused. She said if they couldn't have honest conversations in cabinet, the government was already dead. Then she walked out. Within an hour, she'd submitted her resignation letter. It was published within 2 hours. The letter was brutal. Cooper wrote that she could no longer serve in a government that lacks direction, vision, and the competence to deliver for the British people. She specifically criticized Starmer's inability to make difficult decisions and tendency to prioritize political survival over national interest. That afternoon, Defense Secretary John Healey resigned. His letter was shorter, but equally damning. He wrote that the Prime Minister has lost the confidence of his cabinet and his party. Then Education Secretary Bridget Phillipson resigned. She cited fundamental disagreements about the government's priorities and the Prime Minister's leadership style. By evening, Transport Secretary Louise Hay and Northern Ireland Secretary Hilary Benn had both resigned. 5 cabinet resignations in one day. That's not a reshuffle. That's a collapse. Wednesday morning, Starmer faced Prime Minister's questions. He looked terrible, pale, exhausted. When he stood to speak, his hands visibly shook. Conservative leader Rishi Sunak asked directly, "Will the Prime Minister resign?" Starmer's answer was rambling. He talked about inherited challenges, about global economic headwinds, about the government's achievements. He never actually said no. The Labour benches behind him were silent. No supportive cheers, no encouragement. Just awkward, heavy silence. Opposition MPs smelled blood. They kept asking variations of the same question. Will you resign? Do you have confidence of your cabinet? Can you continue? Starmer's answers got worse. He stumbled over words, lost his train of thought mid-sentence. At one point, he simply stopped talking and looked down at his notes for several seconds. The speaker had to ask if he was finished. It was painful to watch. This wasn't a leader under pressure performing badly. This was a man having a breakdown in Parliament.
Raising questions about Keir Starmer's judgment. And what really angered Labour MPs is while everyone's talking about Peter Mandelson, they're not talking about the things the government has done. The Renters' Rights Act, a move to a greener energy system, helping people with energy bills, lifting the two-child benefit cap, breakfast clubs, the list goes on. But it's a list that more and more Labour MPs feel isn't being heard because of Keir Starmer. They think he's not selling it properly and that questions about his judgment have overshadowed the message the government has been trying to.
Chapter 2. The Psychological Unraveling. People close to Starmer describe a leader who's been deteriorating for weeks. The pressure of office has overwhelmed him. Sleep deprivation, constant criticism, endless crises. It's broken something fundamental. Friends report he's barely sleeping, maybe 3 or 4 hours a night. He's lost weight visibly. His suits hang loose. He looks gaunt in photos. The toll is obvious. Aides describe mood swings, sometimes defiant, insisting everything is fine, other times despondent, questioning whether he should continue. The inconsistency makes governing impossible. One former advisor, speaking anonymously, said Starmer has become paralyzed by indecision. He asks for reports, demands more analysis, calls endless meetings, but makes no actual decisions. The government has stalled because the Prime Minister can't choose a direction. The cabinet resignations hit him particularly hard. These weren't backbench rebels. These were people he appointed, people he trusted, people who sat across from him at meetings and smiled. And they still walked out. That betrayal, whether justified or not, devastated him emotionally. His performance at PMQs on Wednesday wasn't just bad politics. It was a public display of someone losing control. The trembling hands, the stammering, the inability to maintain composure under hostile questioning. These are signs of acute stress beyond what most people can handle. There's a human tragedy here, alongside the political crisis. Starmer is a person, a human being under pressure that would break most people. The problem is, he's also Prime Minister, and the country can't afford to have a leader who's psychologically unable to function. The comparison to previous prime ministers is stark. Thatcher faced cabinet rebellions and stayed composed. Blair handled Iraq war protests without visibly cracking. May survived Brexit chaos with dignity, even if her policies failed. Starmer is falling apart after less than a year in office. That raises serious questions about his suitability for the role. Mental health matters, and there's no shame in struggling under extreme pressure. But leading a country requires resilience that Starmer apparently lacks. Some Labour MPs are whispering that he needs to step down for his own health. That continuing is destroying him personally. They frame it as compassion, but it's also recognition that a broken leader can't govern.
And then came his resignation letter. He told Starmer directly, quote, "It's now evident that you will not guide the Labour Party into the next general election." He cited policy missteps, the decision to cut the winter fuel allowance for pensioners, and a leadership style that left the public, in his words, quote, "unsure of who we are and what we truly."
Chapter 3. Why the Cabinet Abandoned Him. The resignations weren't spontaneous. This had been building since Labour took office. Starmer's leadership style alienated his own team. He's described by ministers as controlling but indecisive. He wants input on everything but makes no final calls. This creates paralysis. Ministers can't do their jobs when decisions get stuck at the top. Immigration was the breaking point for Cooper. Labour promised to control borders. The numbers have gone up instead. She pushed for tough policies, deportation flights, deals with France. Starmer blocked them, afraid of backlash from the left wing of the party. So Cooper was stuck, defending a policy she knew was failing. That's an impossible position for a Home Secretary. The economy frustrated Reeves, though she hasn't resigned yet. Growth hasn't materialized. Investment is weak. Business confidence is low. She wanted bold, pro-growth policies. Starmer worried about political risk. So they've delivered timid measures that satisfy nobody. Defense spending became Healey's issue. The military needs investment. Threats are increasing. Healey presented proposals for increased funding. Starmer said no. Budget constraints. Healey felt he couldn't do his job protecting the country with inadequate resources. Education policy split Phillipson from Starmer. She wanted real reform. Investment in schools. teacher pay rises. Curriculum changes, Starmer gave her minimal funding and no political backing for controversial reforms. She realized she was a figurehead with no real power to change anything. The pattern is clear. Ministers wanted to govern, to make bold choices, to deliver on Labor's promises. Starmer wanted to avoid risk, to manage perception, to not upset anyone. You can't govern like that. Eventually, competent ministers realize they're being prevented from doing their jobs, and they leave. The personal relationships deteriorated too. Starmer doesn't inspire loyalty. He's not warm. He doesn't build emotional connections with colleagues. He treats cabinet like a corporate board meeting. Functional, professional, cold. When crisis hits, people don't fight for leaders they don't personally respect, and Starmer commanded no personal loyalty. So when things got difficult, his cabinet abandoned him. Chapter 4. The Party in Meltdown. Labour MPs are in full panic mode. The government is collapsing and they don't know what to do. Backbenchers in marginal seats are terrified. They won by small margins. If the government implodes, they'll lose their seats at the next election. So they're demanding action. Either Starmer fixes this immediately or he goes. The problem is, there's no consensus on what fixing it means. The left wing of the party wants Starmer gone. They never liked him. This crisis validates their view that centrist Labour can't deliver. They're pushing for a leftward shift, someone like Angela Rayner to take over. The centrists think that would be electoral suicide. They argue going left lost Labour, the 2019 election. Returning to that approach would guarantee defeat. They want Starmer to stay or be replaced by another moderate. Momentum and other activist groups are organizing. They see an opportunity to take back control of the party from the centrists. There are reports of coordination between left-wing MPs and unions to push Starmer out. Trade unions are split. Some back Starmer. Others think he's failing workers. The big unions like Unite are making noises about withdrawing support if the government doesn't deliver for working people. That's coded threat. It means they're watching and could pull funding if things don't improve. Labour's polling has collapsed. Multiple surveys show the party dropping sharply since the cabinet resignations. The Conservatives are gaining. Reform UK is surging in working-class areas. Labour's coalition is fracturing in real time. MPs are receiving furious messages from constituents. Why is the government in chaos? What happened to delivering change? When will things actually improve? They have no good answers. The parliamentary party is discussing whether to force a leadership vote. Labour's rules make this difficult, but if enough MPs demand it, Starmer could face a confidence vote. If he loses, he's finished. The chief whip is trying to hold things together, making promises, issuing threats. But when cabinet ministers are resigning publicly, whips have limited power. The authority structure has broken down. Some MPs are openly defying leadership, skipping votes, criticizing government policy in interviews. The discipline that Starmer supposedly brought to Labour is evaporating. This is how parties implode, not through one dramatic moment, but through cascading failures that destroy trust, discipline, and cohesion. Labour is imploding, and Starmer can't stop it because he's the cause of it. Chapter 5. The opposition smells blood. The Conservatives are euphoric. They've been in disarray since losing power, divided over direction, struggling for relevance. Starmer's collapse has given them new life. Rishi Sunak is calling for an immediate general election. He's arguing the government has lost its mandate, that Britain can't be governed by a prime minister whose own cabinet has abandoned him. It's politically opportunistic, but it's working. Reform UK is capitalizing even more effectively. Nigel Farage is touring the country holding rallies. His message is simple. The establishment parties are broken. Conservative and Labour both failed you. Only reform offers real change. And voters disillusioned with Labour are listening. Polls show reform gaining significantly in traditional Labour heartlands. Working-class areas that voted for change are now considering switching to Farage. That's terrifying for Labour strategists. The Liberal Democrats are trying to position as the responsible opposition. They're avoiding calls for immediate elections, instead offering to work with any government that will deliver stability. It's a smart play. They look mature while the other parties fight. The SNP in Scotland sees opportunity. Labour's weakness allows them to argue that Scotland would be better governed independently. They're pushing for another independence referendum, claiming Westminster is too chaotic to be trusted. The media is relentless. Every day brings new speculation about Starmer's future. Leaked stories from inside government, anonymous briefings from MPs, speculation about successors. It's a feeding frenzy, and each story damages Starmer further. International observers are concerned. Britain's allies need stable government. The UK is a major economy, a security partner. Political chaos in Westminster creates wider problems. European leaders are quietly expressing worry. American officials are monitoring the situation. Nobody wants to see Britain destabilized, but nobody can stop it either. Keir Starmer walked into Downing Street on Tuesday morning as Prime Minister. By Tuesday evening, his government was collapsing. By Wednesday morning, he was visibly breaking down in Parliament. This isn't a political crisis that can be managed. This is the complete disintegration of a government and a leader. 5 cabinet ministers gone. The Prime Minister trembling and stammering through questions. The party in open revolt. The opposition demanding elections. Britain is watching its government implode in real time. And at the center of it all is a man who appears psychologically unable to handle the pressure. There's tragedy here. Starmer isn't evil. He's just overwhelmed. The job broke him. The pressure exceeded his capacity. And now the country is paying the price for elevating someone who wasn't ready. Labour promised change. They promised competent government after years of conservative chaos. Instead, they've delivered their own chaos. Worse chaos. Because at least previous prime ministers maintained composure even when their policies failed. Starmer can't even maintain composure. The cabinet has abandoned him. The party is fracturing. The public has lost confidence. And the prime minister himself is falling apart. This is Britain's biggest political crisis in decades. Not because of war or economic collapse, but because the government simply stopped functioning, because the leader broke. The question now isn't whether Starmer survives, it's how much damage is done before he goes. Every day he clings to power is another day of chaos, another day of drift, another day Britain goes ungoverned. The breakdown started Tuesday. We're watching it accelerate, and nobody knows how it ends, just that it will end badly.